Are these your glasses or my glasses?
They're mine.
Yeah, let me shut these cameras. Run around like a moron. Hey, hope everybody's doing well. So this video for Tuesday is just a kind of a sit down with my good friend TC Pennick from Bay One Customs. We had just spent a couple of days thrashing on getting sheet metal work done on the garbage Camaro, and it was just really cool to catch up with him and share space with this guy, talented builder, and he's become one of my best friends in the world. And we just have these great conversations, and it goes from, you know, your favorite body hammer to philosophical discussions on all kinds of life stuff. So he's a good dude and he's a good friend, and we just started talking. I said, wait a minute, let me get the cameras. So we threw the cameras up and started talking about some ins and outs with restoration, in particular, things that we see in the industry, having been veterans in the industry for a while, and kind of some pitfalls that we see that people go through, and lessons that we've learned the hard way. So that's what this is. It's a casual discussion with him and me, just talking about hot rodding, and the spirit of it is that it's intended to pass on lessons that we've learned that might help somebody. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the discussion, and I just realized I found my other glasses. So this is TC Pennick and Kevin Tetz, Bay One Customs and Paintucation.
Is that on the Jag?
If it's on plastic, that's what it's for.
Just raw plastic?
Raw plastic.
So it don't do nothing for paint?
No.
Do any of them do?
No.
Wow.
No, that's
I've
another
been using
thing.
it for years like that.
Yep. No, an adhesion promoter does nothing except for a raw plastic that it can reflow. So it's either a reversible coating or it's a non-reversible coating. And a adhesion promoter for plastic loosens up and opens up the pores. So it makes it a reflowable, it's like a lacquer paint, turns it into something that the next coating will melt into on top. And then it closes up. So if you think about a thermoset paint, catalyzed paint, it's changed forever chemically. So that adhesion promoter is going to sit on top of it and hope. It's not going to do anything.
You know, some of the shops sell it as that for paint, like door jams and stuff like that.
There may be other chemistry to where that works, but typically your off-the-shelf adhesion promoter is for plastic.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, we're sitting here talking about stuff, and we just went 10 rounds with the garbage Camaro, and, you know, TC and I get together, and we wanted to bring some of this stuff to you, and we talk about these things. We think our way through this process, and we're both car guys and gearheads and skilled technicians, and I'm just going to say it, we know what we're doing. We're old enough to have been in this field for a long time, and I'm proud of that, and it's great to have you as a friend, because I can ask you questions and I can trust your answers, and you can do the same thing with me. And we have different fields of expertise, and so it's kind of a cool thing, and we have a lot of fun every time we get together. And another day we'll tell you stories about going to SEMA and all that kind of stuff, because we've had some pretty wild adventures out in Las Vegas. But today we wanted to bring you a perspective on realistic expectations on restoring a car. There's so many people that go into this discipline, making sure the mics are on, and have no idea what they're getting into, right?
Right.
You know, the whole story of how many abandoned projects do you know of right now in your immediate area?
Several.
Yeah. And that's...
Well, and a lot of times it'll be a deal where a cousin left it to me, my father left it to me, and a car they're really not interested in, and then they start on something like that, start investing in it, where it's not their favorite car, because it is a long investment, a lot of time.
It's a lot of time, and it's a really nice thing. It's a heartfelt thing. It was my grandfather's car. It was my uncle's car. I'm going to restore it someday. That's a beautiful sentiment. But I'm not going to say it's misguided, but a lot of times it's uninformed. So for instance, one of my main recommendations on if somebody's going to dive in, both feet on a restoration, you and I are both goal setters. That's how we achieve them. You have to visualize, you got to speak the dream, and then you got to back time it. We're going to talk about back timing in a second. But what I want to say to anybody that's listening that's never done it before is you have to set your goals. And the goals I've got written down here are a restoration, a resto mod, and a race car. to me, that's the big three categories. So have you got different approaches for all three of those vehicles?
Yeah, but I usually talk to the customer and try to fill out what their end goal is with it. But because you kind of can blend some of those together.
Yeah.
You know, like I was telling you about the Camaro. He wants to do a 67 Camaro, but you could get a Swartz chassis and put under it. It'd look just like your normal car, but he could still do autocross and play around with it and have a multi-use hot rod.
Well, and here's the other thing. People think, oh my gosh, a chassis, I'm going to put a chassis under a car, my budget's blown. Not really. You can do race suspension, do the big brakes, Pro Touring brakes, suspension, rack and pinion conversion on the front, and go to the back and do a 4-link and do sway bars and all that kind of stuff in the back. And then you've got to have frame connectors back and forth if you're talking about a unitized body car. By the time you do all of that stuff, you're into it for just about as much as a chassis.
Yes, yeah, well, and you're just paying for time, so labor rate at $100 an hour or whatever, and you think about disassembling all that stuff, prepping, priming it, painting it, installing it, and then where you can go buy a chassis for $16,000, $18,000, that's and you can get it powder coated, you can get it set up for the motor you want. I mean, you can get it all the way with the computer and everything if you want, and saves a lot of time and money.
So for me, a restoration and a resto mod, which is like a day two. It's like you're going to have higher performance, maybe a fuel injection top, maybe more comfortable seats, better looking wheels and tires. That's a resto mod. That can be put back to the original specs of a original vehicle. Once you go race car, once you go with tubs in the back, a full-on roll cage, and an SCCA certified or a IHR, whatever the certification is, roll cage, you've altered that car to the point to where it's going to take an unrealistic amount of resources to go back to an original car. So to me, there's a dividing line there. So when you're setting your goals, what is your goal? You want a restoration? You want a resto mod, or you want a race car? To me, that's the big three categories. And the restoration, here's where a lot of people go horribly wrong too. I think that people remember cars romantically. Like, we think about these cars back when we were in high school, and we forget how rough they were, how terribly they handled in the wet weather. And people want a restoration, which is very expensive to do, and then they end up with a car that they're not satisfied with. Have you ever done that with you ever had a customer come back to you and say, boy, I wish I want a suspension upgrade. I want a brake upgrade. I want to get power steering now.
Oh yeah, all the time. And sometimes they won't admit it. Sometimes, like if you build a car with say a roll cage and they want all this stuff in there, it's a little difficult getting in and out of a roll cage.
Yeah.
And then it makes it a little unuser friendly. You know, so you really have to talk to them about what is the end goal in it. Is your wife going to ride around in it? Do you need seat belts in it? You know, you need air conditioning in it and all that.
Yeah.
And you know, here lately I've done some of these complete conversions where you can put a new car in there.
Yeah.
And that makes it very user friendly for the wives because you get the comfort and all the goodies and creature comforts.
Well, not only that, but to be able to, like Supercharger, 69 Charger on a Hellcat Challenger, he can drive that into the service bay of a Chrysler dealer and get the OBD2 port plugged in and diagnose a trouble light that's coming on.
Yeah, and one of the biggest reasons for that build was he's always had Chargers throughout his whole life, but his wife didn't like the getting out smelling like gas.
Yeah.
So we put it under that new chassis, and that's really how that one started.
Yeah, yeah.
And now she's driving that car.
It's a beautiful car that anybody can drive that has 700 horsepower.
Yeah.
So set your goals, set realistic goals. So let's talk about initial costs. Everybody knows that the cost of these cars on Marketplace or in Hemmings or on eBay, they're kind of gone through the roof. Since 2020, the price of used vehicles, particularly nice-looking collector cars, has gone crazy. In your opinion, is it better to start off with a cheaper car that needs more or buy a better car that needs less?
Well, that depends on the customer, because a lot of the customers like the build. They enjoy ordering the parts and seeing UPS come, and a lot of them doesn't know it during the build until it's over. And they're like, you know, I had a good time building this and going on the adventures of finding the parts and all that was involved with that. And then now it's done, I just wash it and show it.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
But some people like that. You know, some people like just to go buy something and start using it and showing it.
Yep.
You know, it just depends on the person.
And I've talked to people that want to do a car, but they don't own a welder and they don't know anything about rust repair. So for that person, it's way better to spend more money on an Arizona car or a Texas car or a California car, have it shipped back, and then just do replacement stuff like carpet and interior, something that somebody can handle on their own. And then again, you have to be, again, setting realistic goals. We have to also admit what our talents are and what we lack. as far as the skill set goes, you know, and I'll be the first to admit that I'm not a mechanic. I know how to put engine parts together, but I'm not a mechanic. So I depend on you and Ian Johnson and people that are actual mechanics to guide me down that pathway. I'm really good at listening to people that know more than me.
Yeah, well, until you can farm a lot of that stuff out. Like when I built the Hitman for that man, he would always, there was things that he could do, but mostly he would farm it all out. He'd get all the parts ordered, he'd get the plan going,
Yeah.
but then he's going to have a body shop do that, he's going to have somebody do the wiring, and he'd just farm all that stuff out. And he built several cars like that, that way, you know.
So that brings me to the next topic. I'm kind of jumping around my list. People think mistakenly that you can buy an old car like maybe this Camaro or an old Mustang, and you can quote unquote restore it and flip it and make money. What's your experience with that?
That'll never happen.
No.
You know, because even like at my shop at $100 an hour, a standard Camaro, if you just did the basics, it's 1,000 hours, maybe 1,500 hours.
Yep.
That's if you don't start modifying. Now some of these customs I do is 3,500, 4,000 hours.
Yes.
And multiply that times $100 an hour, and then you see we're at just in labor, not in parts.
Yeah.
And not only that, time. You're talking about sometimes 2, 3.5 year build, and
So yeah, so then it becomes a question of have you set your goals properly? Do you have the resources that you need to do that? Or the alternative, we were talking about this last night over dinner. I went up and I sold Zed-Sled and Cetane truck at a Mecum auction. We took that money and poured it back into development on the Paintucation professional training courses. And it was a really interesting experience going up to Mecum, and it taught me a lot of things. It taught me that if you're going to do that and try and make money doing that, you have to be able to read the room. You have to understand what cars sell and what color they are and all that type of stuff. And there's a whole strategy for that, for winning at those car auctions. Because you can't just have a nice car, you've got to have the right nice car in the right group in the right day. So it's a real science doing that. But what I also learned is that if somebody's decided they just want a cool classic car, don't go on a Saturday. Those auctions start at Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then the heavy hitters start to roll in Friday, and the super high dollar collector cars are there on a Saturday. Don't go Saturday. Go Wednesday and go Thursday. And you're going to find beautifully restified or restored or fixed up cars, or even just nice classic cars for pennies on the dollar in those first few days. So that's my best advice to anybody there. And I saw this firsthand. I saw a 55 Buick convertible. It was gorgeous. It was a red and white two-tone, brand new interior. You know all the chrome on those cars. It had probably $40,000 worth of chrome on it, and ran great. Open up the hood, it was nice painted. It was an nailhead engine, and it looked gorgeous. Red and white two-tone in this thing, and it rolled across the block for less than $30,000. And you and I both probably couldn't kick the paint job out for less than that. Yeah. On that car. So somebody walked away with a gorgeous classic car that they can take in a parade, their daughter can get married in, and they're in it for pennies on the dollar over restoring the cost of it.
Yeah, that too. And if you don't have the ability to go and do that, you can just go to your local car shows.
Yeah.
You take a pocket full of cash, I mean, not even $10,000, $20,000, and you will buy something really, really nice at a car show. Yep. That somebody's maybe had 2 or 3 times that in it. They just want out from under it. Or one that's not complete. There's even forums where you can get on where you can buy vehicles that's not complete yet.
Yeah.
And look through there. But like I said, a lot of people really enjoy the build. Doing the build is a lot of fun for the customer. Every time UPS comes down the driveway and
It is exciting, and I'm a journey person rather than a destination person, and I love the build. I love the problem-solving aspect of it, like this Camaro, cutting it apart down to the nubs, and then now to the point where it's all burned in, it's a car again. I love the process of it and the satisfaction that I get from it. That's my joy in the whole restoration game, and I love spraying paint. But I also know that you can't get to the point to where you're going to be super satisfied with the paint without doing a whole ton of work underneath it, right?
Right, and like you said earlier, it's kind of like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. And it's set goals, so you may have 1,000 hours worth of work to do, but if you just set little goals like today, we're going to put the quarters on.
Yeah.
Or just make that your next goal to get that part done.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't look so big when you can make those little accomplishments and goals and and work through it, because it is a lot if you try to look at it all as one.
If you look at it all at once, it's overwhelming. So you taught me this lesson, and I'll never forget it. I'll always be grateful to you for so many things, but for this lesson in particular. When we were doing Jaded, custom 66 Mustang on a Schwartz chassis, Pro Touring, all the stuff, all the things.
55 days.
55 days.
I was right in there somewhere.
And that sounds like a lot of days, but it's not a lot of days. We were invited out by Heat Shield Products to have the car on the floor. And I was still working full-time at Power Block and running Paintucation, and you had Bay 1, and you were full bore, and all the things that we were doing. And I said yes, and it was the first car that I was ever gonna do that got invited out to SEMA. That's a huge thing, man, and it mattered to me. And it was kind of the first clue that I could step away from that job and still have a successful career. So it was really important for me, and I was in over my head. And TC actually shut his shop down for a couple of months while we got that car done. But one of the first things that we did, and this is important, is we pulled out a dry erase board and a calendar. We said, all right, here's our finish date. The truck is coming in October 20th to get out to SEMA by November 3rd. So that's when we have to have gas in the tank, the car running, turn signals running. It has to be ready for SEMA, right?
Right.
And I want you to, I'm not going to just tell everybody what you did, but I want you to talk about this as well. But you taught me the secret to back timing. You said, here's our end goal. Now, where's our halfway point? We know what halfway point is in the car, approximately. It's going to be bodywork and metal, blah, blah, blah. And basically, you said, get your halfway point, and then divide those halves into halves. So you have your quarter-way point, and then you can divide it down into days, and you can look at it a day at a time. And if you can dedicate yourself to the process, and you set your small goals and meet them, you're probably going to meet your end goal. And it blew my mind, and it was really important, and it made that project, as overwhelming as it was, accessible and doable. Where did you learn that?
Well, I mean, it's just part of the game, you know, and some of those goals might be 10, 12-hour days to get to that point.
Yeah.
And just keep doing that and doing that. And then trying to remember everything. Like, I remember at one point we were in the parade, and you were out in the Coke machine buying bottled water because we didn't get the radiator full, you know,
Yep.
and stuff like that. But,
Yep.
you know, it just comes at you so fast.
Yeah. Well, and we achieved the goal, but we didn't think past that goal because we were so scrambling and working so hard to get the goal. So after the goal, we didn't think about, is there gas in the tank?
Yeah, we run out of gas.
Will it heat?
We did run out of gas.
We did run out of gas. Well, yeah, for sure. And here's a funny story. I'll tell on myself. The truck driver, it was a pilot transport, had dropped it off, and you could see he was fuming. He was so mad. He said, I've had to push this car on and off of the trailer 3 times because I've had other cars unload in front of this car. It won't run. And I went, dang it, something's wrong. And I'm thinking it's EFI, something wrong, it's electronic, it won't run, blah, 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 blah. So I limped it into the shop because it would fire and then go and then die. And it would fire and then go and then die. I limped it into my shop and I just shut it down. So a couple of weeks later, my brother-in-law, a good friend of mine that I used to work in collision shops in Carson, Messer, we're standing around there, and Steve, Randy's other friend, people you don't know, it doesn't matter, but we're standing around the car, and Carson says, fire it up. I said, I don't know if it'll keep running. He said, now fire it up. Ying, 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 brum, and then it dies. And then it would stumble and stumble, and he looked at me and he said, sounds like it's out of gas. It was only then that I started thinking about how much gas is in this thing. You know, and at your place, you reminded me later how much gas we had in the stupid car. You know, it was what? Was it 5 gallons?
Yeah, it wasn't much.
No, and we're driving downtown in Las Vegas because we got into the SEMA parade and stuck in traffic and all that stuff. It never occurred to me that we didn't have any gas in the stupid car.
You remember the fan?
Yeah.
The fan controller, Kevin said, the wire stick to the fuse panel trying to get the fan going.
Yeah.
Because you don't really get to test nothing when you're on those deadlines for like SEMA, especially when you do a full build. But God, we have so many of those stories.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And if you do it at all, you're going to have those stories, and we're lucky enough to have survived them. So, so back timing. So thanks for that. Keep that in mind. Set your goal. Break it in half. Break those halves in half. Break those quarters into eighths. Then you've got a realistic milestone. So that if you find yourself 2 months in and you've got a month left and you haven't met your middle and second or third quarter goals, you're not going to make it. or you've got to readjust it. And there's nothing wrong with readjusting your plan, but you got to have one, right?
Right, right. And in these cases, we was doing this in 50 and 60 days. Most of the SEMA builds end up like that. Where a big build like this, they wouldn't be so hard to meet. You know, you could just set a goal of putting the quarters on. And another good thing for me is sleeping on it. So like for SEMA, you don't get that chance when you're on such a deadline. But like this, you can set the quarters and then just sleep on it. And you come out the next day, make sure you got everything in place, everything has been primed, and everything you need to go in there. Because once you put them on, there's no going back unless you cut it back off.
Yeah.
And you just make sure everything's in there.
We're not cutting those back off. Yeah. Okay, here's a question for a home builder, for a guy that's buying all of his stuff. I know people that are really methodical in their thinking process. They want to have this done. They want to make sure they've got this in place when they need it. Is it better to buy all your parts up front and then use them as you need them, or is it better to buy your parts as you progress in the build?
That's a good question, because sometimes that varies back and forth, because sometimes there's just this kind of little natural flow. You know, we talk about it, and you know, we'll get our mind around kind of how we're going with it, and then just kind of work our way through. But like when I worked for Stu, he was on it. You know, he would come in and say, all right, here's the motors coming from here, this and that and this and that. So it kind of depends on the car, the situation, and the flow of the thing.
I just know that I've learned my lesson. I've bought things 2 and 3 times for the same car, because I bought it all up front, I mothballed it, and then I forgot where I put it, or I forgot I even had it, and I didn't look at my receipts. And actually, a guy sent me some Camaro parts because he had gone through his, and he ended up finding a box of stuff that he forgot he even bought. So he just ended up saying, do you want this stuff? I'm never going to use it because my car is finished. And it was so great for him to do that. And I got parts that I don't have to buy, door strikers and things like that. But it was an expensive mistake for him, because he spent a couple of $100 on stuff that he'd already purchased, you know. And I'm not laughing at the guy, because I've done the same thing. But for me, I think it's best to divide the restoration up into sections. I think it's fine to get all your sheet metal at once, but don't buy your trim. Don't buy your chrome stuff. Don't buy your bumpers until you're ready for that. Then it might cost a few more days of planning and a few more dollars in shipping, but I think it's best for an organizational standpoint to break it up into chunks.
Yeah, well, usually for me, there's usually 2 main things that I do. First off is the wheel and tire package and the ride height.
Yeah.
And make that look right, and then build to that. And then the second thing is, if you're going to run any kind of electronic controlling, make sure you get something up to date, and that your company, whoever you know that does tuning, can tune it.
Right.
Because I have been locked into builds before where we build it up and take 2 or 3 years to build, and then you've got a controller or whoever it is, and it's out of date.
Right. It's 3 generations back, and there's no support for it.
Yep.
Yep.
And so if you're going to carburet it and all that, that's fine. But controlling that transmission and then controlling that motor is so crucial. But like that, what's that, Holly Dominator?
Yeah.
That was been a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it does so many things all at once. I had that in Z-Sled, and it's a trans controller, it can be a boost controller, it's an engine control module, and so it does everything, and they continue to support that piece of equipment. So, yeah, if you want to invest in that, sure, that's I think, a solid investment. But I've also seen guys with the older generation snipers, and now the newer sniper is so much easier to connect. The RF signal interference is way less than it used to be, and it's a better mousetrap and less expensive now. So, yeah, again, you know.
And say, I've got a Chevelle out there right now. We started building 10, 15 years ago, Mud Chevelle. I don't know if you remember that. And he has one of the earlier versions of the Sniper. I don't remember what it was that Holly had. And it had a little handheld, and he's had to go in there and change all that. And it's all had to been taken out and now updated with a new system. But the technology changes so fast, it's hard sometimes just to stay ahead of it.
So how do people find Bay One Customs if they're interested in checking you out?
You can just go to YouTube, and it's Bay One Customs.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the channel. And like with the Supercharger and even the Woody I did for Bruce High in California, it's documentation. So these cars, which Supercharger's not, but the Woody's in California. Mm-hmm. And if he has a problem with something on the interior or whatever, he can just go to that chapter or that page and look through that part of the build. Yeah. And even like Supercharger, if he ever goes to sell it, he can show everybody the structure we put inside of it and all the work we did, and that we pickled it and epoxied it and all that stuff that we did to it, which is good for the car, good for the customer, and everybody involved.
Well, for me, voyeuristically, it's really interesting to see what you do, how you do it, your thought process. So even if it's not the customer's car, I find your channel pretty entertaining. So I just wanted to say again, thanks for coming out, for helping on the Camaro. And we just wanted to pass on some stuff to you guys that it's conversations we have. I'm not going to say on a daily level, but it's certainly every time we get together and do this. And it's just been a cool thing to be able to learn a little bit more about my craft through you, and I just appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you, because I'm very bad at doing the videos and stuff. It's just so much work. And if you watch my channel, you'll see it's very cut and dry and simple.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because when you start videoing, you have to make sure the radio's off.
Yeah.
And your battery's charged. And not only that, you're trying to tell a story. So what I'm videoing, I have to stop and think, okay, Mr. Tucker needs to see this part of his build. Mm-hmm. So I need to stop and video that. And if you miss it, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
Or if your camera might not work at that time,
Or your camera blinks off and you lose your audio.
Yeah, you can't go back and get that. So
no.
it is difficult. So I'm amazed at what you do with all the editing and video, and it's so much time to do that.
It's time, but it's fun. I'm having a lot of fun with YouTube, and you've been with me on different TV shows and stuff like that. But YouTube, to me, there's so much more freedom to tell. We never lied on TV. Me and Ryan always wanted to make the show that we wanted to watch, and we stood behind our builds and we stood behind our work. But we just had so much real estate to tell the story. And with YouTube, there's just so much more freedom to tell all of the truth, mistakes included. And so I'm having fun with it. We appreciate you guys watching. And if you haven't subscribed, hit the button, subscribe, and I don't know. If you see this before the holidays, Merry Christmas, have a happy holiday, and check us out every Saturday morning.
Yep.
All right. It's time for adult beverages.